Hello everybody and welcome to IEEE's AutoCAD series. I'll be your host for this mini-series that we're doing. Lucas Saber, that would be me. And now we're going to go ahead and get started with the actual drawing itself. Okay, so what I'm going to use this drawing for is I'm going to make it pretty clear how you can use each of these tools under the Draw menu here on the ribbon. Now, we're going to get into modify in the second video, and we're going to do modify, and then we're going to do a drawing using some of those things. But for this video, we're going to wrap up starting with using all this draw stuff. So if you wanted to, I'll use text a little bit here, lightly, and we'll go into it a bit more later. But just so it's pretty clear, I'm going to make a little text thing. I'm going to do line, just so you guys can see how to do that. Line's pretty simple. You click the line tool up here, or if you want to, you can do this with any of them, but if you wanted to type in line, you can just type it in here or down here. You can specify the first point by clicking, or if you can see there on the screen, there's two text boxes. You can do coordinates on the XY system. See, there aren't any degrees, it's X and Y. So if you click tab, you can tab between those if you want to do very specific spots on your drawing. However, I'm just going to do a line here by clicking the first point, and you'll see once I've done that, it's giving me a length and an angle. So let's just humor ourselves here and do 50 degrees and make it 3.25 long. Now I know you can change your units and everything. I believe right now this is in inches. We'll get into that a bit more probably in the second video here, because we'll have everything all specifically laid out based on a single drawing that I'll have shared with all of you. So that's a line. We'll go now to this and we'll do a polyline. Basically, a polyline is just a series of connected lines that you can do all with one tool. So I could click there, 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 however much you want. Nothing too special. It gets the idea across. Each one of these has an angle and a length that you can do, but the idea is that you don't have to use the line tool like 50 times in a row. You can just kind of click and go with the polyline, which is really great. So we're going to do a circle now. Now, the circle is a pretty involved thing because there are so many kinds of circles, lots of different kinds. You have ones where you click the center and you enter a radius. You have some where you have a center and you enter a diameter. You have some where you can do 2 points on a circle and it'll do its best to make the size for you. 3 points, you can have tangent to 2 lines and a radius that you give it, or tangent to 3 lines and it'll figure out the rest. So because there are so many of these, I won't get into every little one because it's pretty self-explanatory. But if you want more information on it, AutoCAD actually has a really awesome built-in system where if you hover over something, you can press F1 for more help, but it'll actually show you how it's used. So if I were to do this, tan, 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 which is 3 tangents to define a circle, it'll show you. You can use the tangent tool in 3 spots to define a circle that'll fit in that area. So even if you're not sure how to use these tools, you can obviously Google them, but you can also use the help system built into AutoCAD already. And there's actually online, if you were to do F1 here, you can see there's a little page that brings up how to use all of these easily and clearly. So there's a built-in system that makes it very helpful. So you just need to think of what you want to do and then just basically try to find it in AutoCAD, and if it can do it, it'll help you to its best of its abilities to do that. So I'll be doing a center radius circle here. So click the center and we'll give it a radius of 0.75. Now you'll see this with the other drawings, but these snaps are really important because if I wanted the center to be at a specific spot, maybe I could draw a line from one spot to where the center would be, draw the center, and then draw the radius out to another certain line or to a specific location can be very helpful. It all kind of comes together once you work with it more, but that's the general idea of what we're doing here. So the next thing we're going to do here is the arc. So now, quick thing I'm doing with my my keyboard here, if you click enter, it'll just enter in the text box. If you do control enter, it'll be like a submit or OK for the tool. That happens with most of them. So the arc is even more complicated. As you can see, there's so many different kinds of it, but it seems pretty overwhelming. But if you were to look at it, you'd say, what kind of arc do I need to make, and what references do I have, and then what would you pick? So in this case, I could make a 3-point arc, right? So I'll make one line, a second line, and a third line, and it'll go around the circle or around the arc like that. Well, maybe let's say I wanted to make just a certain arc as a part of a circle. Well, I could do a start, a center, and then an angle. So let's say I wanted 135 degrees. We'll do that. Now you'll notice I'll do repeat. Oh geez, that's not what I wanted. Okay, so if I wanted to do, let's say, recent input and arc, I did this. You'll see there are these green reference lines that make things really clear on how you might want to do it. So I'll do center, center point, and then that, right? So you can see my cursor is snapping to 45, 90, 135, and that's defined down here, right there. Now there are plenty of other ones where you can do start, center, and length, start, end, angle, start, end, direction, start, end, radius. There are lots that you can use. It pretty much just depends on how you want to use it. Now, like I said, this is the kind of place where you would just go through these tools on your own time and just kind of mess with them and see what you might want to draw. So let's see what we got here. You know what? We're going to do something for fun. Make a big circle. Make a circle there. And we're going to make one more. Probably a little closer. Now wouldn't you look at that? We've made Mickey Mouse. That's awesome. So we're going to continue here. So, so the next one that we're going to do, let's make another text object here. Rectangle. So this is the rectangle tool up here. It's more so for rectangles and polygons. So let's actually go and edit this here. So the rectangle tool is pretty straightforward. You can start at certain coordinates, or you can just click, and then you can drag and go to other coordinates. And that's pretty useful. If you were to down arrow, what's really awesome though is you can specify an area. You can do the dimensions of the actual part. Lots of different options that you can do here. But the basic one is just going to be doing a rectangle with a start point and an end point. Polygon, that's a really cool tool. So if you were to click in a center, it'll ask you for how many sides you want to do. So in this case, I want to do 7 because 7 is an interesting number, I guess. So we'll click 7. It'll do a center point here. And it'll ask you if you want to do inscribed or circumscribed. Inscribed means that it's going to go to the very outside points, and circumscribed means it's going to go to the very inside points. I'll show you that in a second. So if you were to click this here, let's make a circle, snap it to the center, and you can see this, right? That circle that's on the outside of this polygon is going to be the circle that is circumscribed, and if you're going to do another one, you may need to highlight, you may need to go on the edge of stuff to get snaps to activate, but you go here, you go to the inside edge. That would be inscribed. That's the difference between those, and that's how you can make them. And that's what those options are. Now for a lot of these tools, you can have a few different options for them. So let's say I want to do 7, click, and I want to do inscribed. Oh, actually, no, where was it? 7 sides. It says I can specify the center of a polygon, and you can also specify stuff by edges and stuff. Typically, you just go with the tools that you already have, but if you need to, the options are there. Like I said, there's like 100 different ways you can do a lot of things in here, but it just depends on what's convenient for you. You have all these options, so you're allowed to make things convenient for yourself. So next we're going to do the ellipse tool and elliptical arc. It is basically the same thing as circles, just ellipses. Okay, so if we were to now go to the ellipse tool, you can do a center. This one's going to ask you, it walks you, my bad. It will walk you through how to use the tools with these different windows that go by your cursor. So it'll say, specify a center of the ellipse. So we'll specify the center, right? And this says, if you get out of your snaps, wherever they may be, specify the endpoint of the axis. So this will be the endpoint of the axis. Okay, and that was based on a radius, right? So now it's going to ask you specify the distance to the other axis based on a radius. So you can see I can change that and click. And there you go. We've made an ellipse. Straightforward enough. You can make it with an axis and an end. Specify the axis endpoint. You can go end to end and then radius. Oh, by the way, I think I forgot to mention you can select things by just clicking and dragging to draw regions, or clicking and dragging without holding to do that. Or if you want to select whole objects, you can do the other way for blue. And same thing for that. That'll be more evident in the further videos, but good thing to mention. So we can then do the elliptical arc. It'll be the same exact thing, so we'll do the axis endpoint. Basically, you just draw an ellipse, except this time you specify a starting angle and an ending angle. So you basically just make a part of the ellipse. Okay, so let's do this next part here. So this tool is called the hatch tool. So I will go ahead and make a header for this. So if you do this, hatch is a tool that is used to basically shade and color a region. So let's do this here. Repeat that, and we'll do this. So let's say there's this region that we've bounded by a couple different lines, and I want to hatch it, and I want to give it a certain area. So we click hatch, or type it, or however you want to enter the tool. Let's say you want to make it solid, a solid color. You can click solid up here. You can change up in this ribbon the different colors you want to use, what kind, if you want to do a gradient or anything specific, transparency, a lot of different settings that you have available to you. So in this case, I'm going to do the angle one. These are just a bunch of different patterns, as you can see here. You can do a drop down, and you'll have all these different kinds of patterns you can use, which you can specify a scale, color, type, transparency, all kinds of awesome things. There are so many different options that may seem overwhelming, but if you use them and you understand what they're used for, what you need to know and what you don't need to know, they're actually super awesome to have as in case you need them. So it's really great. So in this case, I'll do angle. I'll put it in here. Well, I want to see the angles more, so the size of that angle drawing, I want to scale it down. So I'll do 0.25. And now if I hover over here, you'll see it's much smaller. I basically zoomed into that actual drawing there. Now let's say I want to do another one. I'll enter the hatch tool again, see what I have available, and maybe I want some bricks because I'm feeling like bricks. So go ahead and we'll do one. And if you were to zoom in, those would be very, very big bricks. So let's try 0.1 and scale it down really small. Well, that wasn't quite small enough, so let's go even smaller. 0.005, maybe that'll do it. Select our bricks. There we go, that works. So we're working with really small things, so we have to scale it down so it works better. But it's the same kind of process for all this stuff. You can hatch things, more or less decorate your drawing to be a bit more presentable for whoever it is you're showing it to. Makes it clearer to understand what you're going with. So we're going to go down here and finish up with the rest of these tools. Not all of them will be up here, so you may need to go to the drop down here to do a couple extra ones. The first one we're going to do of these, we're not going to do all of these because not all of them are super useful, to be honest. But the first one we're going to do is called the Spline tool. That is really useful because you can make these very organically shaped things, because you can see a lot of these tools that we've used so far are they're pretty blocky, they're pretty defined based on shapes. So if you need to make something a bit more organic, you can do that with Spline. Basically, you make a line, you start at a certain spot, and you can do, angle, degrees, whatever. If you want to click the down arrow, you can do some other stuff, other options, but you can click on your next point, and you'll see it'll end up kind of creating like a series of connected arcs in a weird way. So then you keep making these lines, and if you were to play with it, this is especially a tool that you would want to just play with, because there's so many different so many different ways that you could use it. But I'll just leave it like this. Oh no, my spline line. No. Okay, you get the idea though. And I'll click Control Enter, and that'll leave it there. So that's how you can make spline lines. It can be for user preference or whatever. You've got another one here, which is the Spline CV. We'll do that right next to it. It's basically a spline line, but it works a little different. It works with understanding the radius of where you're at, and it kind of draws it out for you and leaves those reference lines that you're drawing until you actually click enter, like this. So they're there, and they go away when you click enter and you submit the whole thing. But if you were to click it, you can actually still see them, and you can edit them. So this is really good if you want to have a specific kind of shape or line shape, and you want to adjust it to be in a very specific way. I know I keep saying the word specific a lot. That has to do with the fact that this program is literally all about specifics. You can use it with all the options involved, all the tools you're allowed to use, you can make some pretty crazy things. And as long as you know the internal workings of it, the limit of what you can make is basically up to your imagination. Is how cheesy that sounds. It's true. You can basically become God in this program. You can do whatever you want. So the next tool we'll go with here is we're going to do the construction line and the ray. Now the construction line is a bit misleading because construction lines are basically, realistically, they're used to show, they're like basically dashed lines that you can use to show that they're temporary and only used for helping to align things. But in the case of AutoCAD, if you were to use them, it would look like this. Basically, the understanding of construction lines with AutoCAD is that it's basically a line that goes forever. That's not really how they're practically named, but that's the idea that they go with in this program. So you would click a spot, basically draw a line, but it'll go in infinite length in any direction. The whole program. But we're not going to do that. That's not really super useful, to be completely honest, because a lot of your stuff are drawings that are enclosed and they're not that involved. But if you need it, it's there. Same thing for rays. It just goes in a single direction, not both. This other one is going to be really useful for when you're making drawings. Sometimes if you have a lot of reference geometry that you're working with, you don't always want to have that is the way that you want to make other drawings or other components snapped together. So it's really useful to have a point, which basically you just click it and it makes a single point. A lot of polka dots. But basically, if you were to do something, like let's say do a circle, you can see it can snap to this specific point. It's a node. It refers to it as a node. So if you have a specific spot in your program and you don't want to have a bunch of reference lines for stuff, you can just make the point at the reference and then delete everything else. Just an example. And then another one here is going to be, I think there's only about 2 left and we're almost done with the video here. Next one will be the divide tool. So if we create a line and we use the divide tool here, select the object to divide and we'll divide it into an equal number of consecutive segments, let's say 3. If I highlight over this, you can see that it is now split it into 3 separate equally sized parts. Now if you do this for a circle and you use divide and you do 3, 4 would probably be better in this case. You'll see if I highlight this, you'll see it'll create it into 4 equal line segments here. Now I believe there's a way that you can break all these apart and you can have very specific parts of this that you can use, but otherwise it creates equally lengthed or partitions of a single segment that you're working with, be it a circle, arc, ellipse, polygon, whatever. And this other one is the measure tool. I'm not really going to give it a ton of thing because it's used for like all of these. If you're not sure of a specific length or anything, you can use the measure tool to very quickly measure things as you would think. So you click measure up here, or you could just type it in. Now let's say I want to measure this whole thing, so I'll click that. That's the thing I'm going to measure. And I'll click to this node. It'll measure it. Let's see here. Click it to measure. And you can specify the length of other things. Basically, you can just measure between points. The dimension tool is really useful for that because you can, it's basically the same thing, but it'll actually read out the measurement for you like that. We'll do that more in the second video though. And you have a couple other things here, but they're honestly not that important to use. They're interesting to mess around with, and I suggest going through them, but they're not really as important as those primary ones that I have right here on our window. I'm going to get rid of these lines because they look pretty bad. But that would be the basic set of tools that you're going to use to make things from scratch. And then you can use all these modify tools, which we'll do in the second video, to edit the way that these things are going to be interacting with each other. So maybe you can do a couple extra things with that, and we'll do that in the second video. But as far as it goes for the AutoCAD series, this is pretty much the end of this first video here. I hope it's been helpful, and I hope that you've learned a couple things from it. I highly suggest that you poke around with the tools on your own time. You're definitely going to take more away from this if you do that. But yeah, no, this is how you can use some of the tools and how you can navigate AutoCAD a bit. So I'll be seeing you guys in the second video. So have a good day, everybody. Thanks for stopping by.